Hi, welcome to Wetpixel Live. I'm Adam Hanlon, I'm the editor of Wetpixel, and we'd like to thank Icolite for sponsoring this episode. Icolite do a huge range of particularly housings, and they do housings for almost every brand and model of camera that there is out there, so they're a great resource, but they also produce arms, some wonderful strobes, and some optics as well, so please head on over to icolite.com to check out what they do. I'm joined by our regular contributor, Alex Mustard. Hi, Alex.
Hi, Adam. Nice to be here.
Nice to see you too. You're looking tanned today.
Yeah, well, a bit of Caribbean sun doesn't do any harm.
You lucky chap. So we, in a previous episode, we spoke about the super resolution options that are now available in Lightroom and Photoshop. And I gather you've been experimenting with them, Alex. So I thought probably a good place to start was, so how have you found super resolution?
Yeah, well, we talked about it when it first came out, and we talked about a lot of things. And I think I've had the chance now to try it on a lot more of my files. And, there's no doubt it's an amazing feature. I know it's not the only way to up-res files, but the fact that it's so convenient that, generally everyone is using Lightroom or Photoshop to read their raw files in. And the fact that it's a one-click and it's suddenly 4 times the size solution is very, very, very good. So for those that don't know, we should just quickly backtrack. Super resolution is a relatively new feature that Adobe have introduced into their RAW converter in Photoshop and into Lightroom as a feature. You find it under the enhance menu, which is the easiest way to do it is to I'm never sure if it's right or left click, right click on the picture, and then under the options you'll find enhance. And under enhance, you'll find super resolution. And and what it does is it doubles the dimensions of both the length and the width of the picture, basically giving you 4 times the resolution. So your picture starts like that, and then if you double it that way and double it that way, you end up 4 times the size. And
in practical terms, I mean, the file size goes from 12 megapixel to 48 megapixel. That's roughly the graph. It's a 4 times increase in size, 4 times increase in the amount of data that's contained within the image. Yeah.
And the camera and the software uses clever processing to do this to a really good amount. Now, what I've found is that it does work really, really well, but I have found it doesn't work equally on every picture. And the first thing I would say is it works really well on very well photographed pictures, perhaps not surprising. But if you've used a good lens and you've shot really, sharp pictures, you're not, slightly off on the focus, or, you slightly messed it up the exposure or anything like that. If you've got a really good input file, it is absolutely remarkable. And so if you yourself are a good photographer, you can have some that, there is a reward for years ago doing a really good job with your old pictures, because actually they now super res unbelievably well. And I think perhaps the more important point is I have found that it doesn't work equally on all cameras. And I think when you've had a combination of a very good lens on perhaps a lower resolution camera, that's what it really likes. So, good quality prime lenses shot really well, good lenses, good dome ports in underwater photography terms, or good macro lenses. Those pictures super res really well. Whereas perhaps when you've not shot something so well, or you've used a bit, or the lens is maybe very tuned to the system, it doesn't work so well. To give you an example, I find that the cameras of mine that it works best with are those full frame Nikon cameras that Nikon produced for a while, which were relatively low resolution. So the 12 megapixel D3 and D700, the 16 megapixel D4 and the 20 megapixel D5 are amazing with super resolution. But I'd also add to that list, and just for my own cameras, the 12 megapixel D2X is also amazing on super resolution. 12 megapixel D2X goes to 48 megapixel, and those files are sharp and clean at 100%. And these are 15-year-old pictures, which are now 50 megapixel perfect, conversion raw files. It's incredible. So that's why I wanted to talk about it again, because I've, revisited a few pictures that I didn't process at the time, reprocessed them, and just been blown away. You zoom in 100% and they're just sharp and clean, and, as long as what is going in is good. The moment something is slightly off, it's, real junk coming out the other end.
So the key thing here is resolution, obviously, whenever you increase resolution, whether you do it through hardware with a camera with a bigger sensor, or you do it through software, ultimately, if you've got flaws in the system, wherever they may be, resolution will show those flaws more dramatically. And conversely, if you've done a well-shot image at relatively low resolution, and with this tool now you can up-res it effectively, it will do a great job. The way it works is essentially Adobe have fed their AI engine, their artificial intelligence engine, a whole bunch of images and got them, and basically they've used it to machine learn, so it's learned how to do it. So it will identify features in images and work on those to what it sees its algorithm expects to work well. And that also means that there will always be some images that just don't work. That's because for whatever reason they're not being recognized by the machine learning so it's not a universal panacea even with perfect technique lenses, so on and so forth. I think one of the really exciting things about, and I know you're going to talk about this too, Alex, but I'm going to jump on first, is the options it gives us with older, what a lot of people would describe as basically obsolete cameras. And it gives them a whole new lease of life, and I think that's so exciting.
Absolutely. I think particularly if you're a photographer operating on a budget, you will find for very little money often these older cameras with older housings that the photographers that use them at the time wouldn't, you'd have to pay them a lot of money for them to take it on a dive. Actually, those cameras produce great files, and one click of super resolution on your favorite pictures, and you've got amazing high resolution files, as long as you're shooting well. And I think the point you were just making is it's glass and getting those optics right is actually really important. And I think when we were shooting 12 megapixel files, people who were like, well, I can be a bit lazy with this or a bit lazy with that because it's not going to show in the file, those files weren't up-res. The people who made sure they got things absolutely spot on at the time will now go back to their raw files and find that actually they're amazing now, and they can really be up-res and feel very contemporary. I mean, I've got them on my screen over here, and I'm just looking at the files, and they're just big and clean, and they look completely as if they were taken this week in terms of the look of the images. It's really incredible, actually.
I think I heard that you took your D5 to the Red Sea. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, yeah. So I was just on the camera front. I'll just say quickly that I found that my micro four thirds pictures taken by me, so photographer consistent, do not up-res as well. And I think some of the higher resolution crop sensor cameras, like say a 24 megapixel D7200, also doesn't like super resolution as much. I think you're hitting more the limits of lenses when you shoot a 12 megapixel D2X. The lens is out resolving the sensor. When you're shooting a 24 megapixel D7200, maybe with a Tachyna, maybe the camera's out resolving the lens, and it doesn't seem to up-res as well. So I don't know. I haven't done endless tests on that, but that's certainly the feeling I get. But definitely the micro four thirds pictures, I don't find super res as much, and it's probably because those lenses are tuned to those sensors, and because the sensors are small, you're already quite close to the limitation of everything, and there's perhaps not quite as much wiggle room in the file. I'd like to do more tests to be really proved wrong on that, but I certainly finding that, and it's not that I'm comparing someone else's files to my own files. They're my files, so the photographer should be reasonably consistent through them. So I think so that's something I found. But it has, with me as well, made me, one of the reasons that I chose, and we've spoken about this before on Wetpixel Live, one of the reasons I chose the D850 as my main camera, despite having already owned a D5, was that I felt that the market was going to just get very used to these 40 to 50 megapixel raw files or process files, and if you give them a 20 megapixel file, some clients will be like, how come your file's so small? And it made me sort of gravitate away from the D850 as a way of future-proofing my stock, gravitate to the D850 from the D5. But actually, the processing I've done using super resolution has encouraged me that if I ever need that really high resolution from the D5, it's there for me. And actually, it encouraged me on the workshop that I ran in the Red Sea at the end of November, beginning of December, I actually just took the D5 on that trip and absolutely loved shooting it. It was definitely the most productive photo trip I've done since we've been back out there doing stuff again. And yeah, love shooting that camera, and if there are pictures that I feel I really want to have a really high resolution version of them, I can have that high resolution version of them. An 80 megapixel file if I really want. I tend to, I tend not to, but I know I've got them. I know I can get them at any point. Should a client say, "Have you got a high resolution version of this?" I know it's there, ready and waiting.
I think another place where this technology may well shine is situations where, or unique shooting situations. So, and a site-specific example is my friend Natalie Gibb in Mexico is shooting the Sony A7S Mark III, which is an amazing low light monster. I mean, there's no doubt that she can shoot it at ISOs that and get very clean results. And but the price on that, if you like, is that the resolution is relatively low, and that's the way it achieves that low light performance. The physics is inviolate. You can't do much about that. But this now opens that door where she can now be getting 48, 50 megapixel files out of that, with all the low light advantages that those big pixels on that sensor and the big photo sites on that sensor give, and still extracting a clean image. And to me, that's a really exciting place where, if you're shooting in dark, gloomy conditions, it could just really change the way you shoot and the tools you use.
Yeah, no, I think it seems like a relatively small thing that maybe, if you shoot a D850, I wouldn't recommend using it ever. You're just creating huge files with no point to them. But I do think for some cameras and some types of photography, like you're saying, and some budgets in underwater photography, it's a game-changing feature. And I think it's really worth us highlighting it again, although we've talked about it before, I just felt it was really worth us doing another episode on it to really bring it to the front of people's minds, because I think it can change your camera choices. It changed what I chose to pick out of my arsenal of cameras to take on a trip, because I knew that I wasn't, I didn't have to worry about that kind of future proofing. I was happy to take a low. So the camera that's normally the Wetpixel Live webcam was actually out there doing some proper underwater.
I was going to say, watch this space for Alex in exotic locations with a D3. It's a really interesting development, and one certainly I think it'd be worthwhile us all keeping our eye on. So
I bet you could pick up a D3 in a housing for nothing, and it'd be a lovely housing, lovely camera.
Like you say, even D2X, but D2X was a great camera.
As long, the files are amazing. And what was funny is on Wetpixel at the time, there was like, the D2X, it's still not good enough. It's still not, and it's amazing how and I was doing those posts as much as anyone. It was amazing, how things have changed, and I know when I was shooting the D2X, it was in that era where a lot of the pros were still shooting film. And they would all tell me that my D2X files weren't good enough. And it's amazing what those files look like now. And you compare, a D2X file super resed against a scan slide, and, it's total chalk and cheese. And it's actually, it's the other way around. It's, it's those files. I mean, both can still be printed, of course, but the D2X files, because the sensor was good and the lenses were good, those files, if they were shot well, they're really good files.
Yeah. It's all about quality, isn't it? So, the reality is, though, most of the nuance and resolution at this sort of level, you're probably not going to see a huge improvement on your online files.
They're going to think.
So there's not a lot of point in me sending you over to look on Alex's website, because you probably won't see a great deal of difference.
Yeah, no, they're all the pictures on the website are limited to 1500 pixels.
But I think I think certainly it's something to watch, and for those of us that are trying to extract the best out of our equipment, it's a technology that's undoubtedly going to improve with time as well. So brilliant. Thank you very much, Alex. Elucidating as always. And thanks to iColite again for sponsoring this episode. We rely on our sponsors for their support for these episodes, so really appreciate it. Thank you to all for watching. Please feel free to add any comments and possibly your experiences using super resolution in the comment section, and I look forward to seeing you on soon. Thank you very much.